revisit this, but I know that we have our applicants in the room now, so if there's anything more to talk about ERF, we can close out the meeting with it and invite the applicants for the Glazer plan to join the table.
Guys. Chairs, yeah.
And I believe that the plan was to have the person who did the habitat assessment join for the meeting. That's what Andrew said last night.
Yeah, and I see Aaron is on there. And I am going to also just bring up the staff report. So you have it. There you go.
Okay, so Matt, we usually start with a sort of staff summary and then ask for the applicant to give an overview of any observations. I'd probably add Aaron to that list. So why don't we start with an overview from the staff and then Aaron, summary of his assessment and then the applicant.
All right. So just going to bring up staff report.
While he's doing that, I'll just ask, did everyone get a chance to actually pull up both documents, the HDA and the plan? The link to the full
I did
HDA,
not find the HDA link.
the full link is in,
Oh, it's embedded in.
it's
the-
embedded in the
okay.
paper on page 5.
Oh, bummer. Okay. I wish
Yeah,
I'd
and
read
it's a very good assessment. I read the whole thing. It was,
So hopefully most folks here are familiar with the Glazer project. We've obviously had an extensive process ahead of the DRB process with the specific plan review and approval over the last couple of years. So what you have in front of you now is the standard, DRB review. This is the discretionary permit review, which just follows Williston zoning bylaw as modified by the specific plan approval, which, as you know, is about the growth management build out sequence more than anything else, and some open space conveyance to the town. So this is a discretionary permit review. We have an approximate 95-acre parcel with about 107 residential unit development and about 48 acres of open space donated to the town under that specific plan approval. There's 2 areas on the parcel where homes are proposed to be constructed, and also 2 distinct open space areas. So the quote unquote view shed corner at Mountain View and Old Stage Road, and then the area around the back by Windswept Farm and into the wet forest that borders Northridge and the Martell property to the west. Land is currently undeveloped, and some of it is in an agricultural use today for both pasture and hay. Some of it is forested. So the recommendation for coming out of this WCC report is that the Conservation Commission discusses the HDA, talk about the method of demarcating wetland buffers as a part of a development condition, and provide any additional recommendations to the DRB. I've already gone over the specific plan, but there's just a nice picture of the proposed development layout showing the open space areas, the wetlands and buffers, and development areas as proposed on the parcel. And we've had a little bit of process just recently this fall in regards to the boundary line adjustment around the pond area. This is the boundary line adjustment from Glazer to McElroy, roughly. Where are we, Brian?
a little bit to the right.
Up
Yeah,
in here.
Yeah, that
So
area.
there's the pond area that was part of this parcel. This was the house that was on the parcel. So that changes the project boundary a little bit, and you might see some just that difference in some of the plans. So this project did go through pre-application, and the Conservation Commission made recommendations as part of the pre-application process. You can see those there, requiring the preparation of a habitat disturbance assessment, which was done. And then accurate wetland delineation on the discretionary permit plan, and we have that with confirmed wetland boundaries and buffers. Keeping the development out of the watershed protection buffers and then demarcating those on the site. So yes, development is proposed outside of watershed protection buffers. Some of it, of course, is quite proximate to them, as we often experience in Williston. And the staff recommendation here is that the Conservation Commission discuss with the applicant today how those buffers ought to be demarcated in the field. The two methods we've typically used are either a split rail fence or everybody's favorite boulders, because boulders don't rot and they're hard to move out of the way. This is just to establish a mowing boundary around the development. We needed an erosion control plan in the discretionary permit set. We have that. We have the open space. Developments in the residential zoning district are considered to be open space developments. They don't come with that quantitative percentage requirement that they do in the ARZD. This is an open space development. There is open space protection proposed, and in fact, in this case, conveyance to the town. And then the last is regarding houses in the view shed. And we have an NA, options 1 and 2 are not applicable because the applicant is developing under specific plan, which provides for the permit protection of the view shed. So.
Already covered.
Already.
Yep.
All right.
180 units.
So, we're going to talk a bit more in a minute about our resource areas, particularly core habitat and wildlife travel corridor. We do have those on the site as well as our wetlands. We do have a high priority for open space conservation on this site coming out of the Environmental Reserve Fund prioritization project. And we do have significant open space preservation proposed. In terms of significant wildlife habitat area, the recommended finding is that the project can comply with that, and that we did have a habitat disturbance assessment conducted. This is the link Reed mentioned, so sorry for not highlighting that more. It is in there. We can talk about that and talk about the functioning of the grassland resource there with Aaron in a second. And there are some measures that can be taken to protect that. One of the challenges we have with this project is that there was a lot of resource impact and sort of arrangement work done as part of the specific plan ahead of this. And there are compromises to be made on a parcel of this size. The specific plan and the proposed open space conveyance tends to kind of cast the die as far as what gets developed and what stays open space. So just considering, yes, there will be impacts to those resources. There's been some decisions made here about what resources will be impacted and which will be developed. And then in terms of our other, we don't have uncommon, rare, threatened, and endangered species. We don't have unique natural communities on the parcel. We have farmland of local importance, and one of the elements of the specific plan and the development proposal is that the ongoing use by Windswept Farm for pasture and some of the haying would be able to continue as part of the build out of the project. As far as viewshed goes, here's your viewshed map. We do have primary background viewshed and primary foreground and secondary middle ground. You can see those layers on the map. And all of this was, I'll just say, taken into great consideration during the specific plan process and drives a lot of that open space pattern, particularly on the Old Stage Mountain View corner. No flood zones. We do have a runoff and erosion control plan. As I mentioned, we do have wetlands. They come with buffers. There's proposal not to impact those. And as I said, take a look and dialogue with the applicant today about demarcation of those buffers and whether that appears to be significant or sufficient as far as WCC is concerned. I already went over the quantitative versus qualitative requirements for open space. And then the last part is, because we have the Glazer specific plan as part of this, we recommend a finding that the project does comply with the approval of that specific plan, where the open space conveyance is proposed. And then there's some discussion of just some stuff we're working on internally, which is the mechanics of sequencing the agreements and approvals about when does open space convey over, and how does that fit within the overall development approval sequence. So your recommended findings, most of these are probably pretty familiar to you. And then your recommended recommendations from staff that would move forward to the DRB. These you might want to ask Aaron or the applicant about a little bit. So a little bit of a recommendation around some supplemental plantings to try to maintain some of the travel corridor function, just despite the proximity of the development to one area of the property. And then we were looking really finally at this proposed landscape buffer between the recreation path and the western property boundary, recommending going from sort of the dense planting buffer to an informal planting buffer to continue to enhance the function of that corridor. So that's an area for focus today. One last time, let's talk about the wetland buffers while we're here. So there's the fastest run through I can give you on the staff report.
Thanks.
And
10 minutes.
Aaron is here from Arrowwood to talk to you about the HDA if you'd like to jump into that, and I can stop my share. And Aaron, I don't know if you want to be able to screen share. I can make you co-host if you need it.
All right, thanks. I don't have anything specific prepared to share or anything like that. So in discussions with Melinda yesterday, it was suggested that I didn't necessarily need to be here, but I had the slot open, so I thought I'd jump in and be available to address any questions as needed. So just very briefly in summary, we conducted a habitat assessment on the property per the Williston regulations, and I think, as you're familiar with, there's kind of two primary concerns that were brought to light through this process. Number one is the grassland bird habitat, which is mapped as core habitat in the Williston regulation, and then the second is the wildlife corridor. The grassland bird habitat is being dealt with also through the Act 250 process, as I'm sure you know. And it's being mitigated through a compensatory mitigation procedure, which is relatively common with Fish and Wildlife these days. And this is a process within which the project would pay into a grassland bird mitigation fund that helps conserve grassland habitat in other locations. That's not something that's specifically laid out in the Williston regulations. There is, to the extent I could find, there is no provision for compensatory mitigation. So I'm not quite sure how you folks deal with that in the past, but certainly the project in its current configuration will likely eliminate the use of that area as grassland bird habitat. And then the second piece is the wildlife corridor connectivity question. It's our opinion that this property is a pretty significant, it is a component of a pretty significant corridor between the Winooski River and the large habitat block south of the interstate. And am I thinking about that right? Yeah, I think so. There's very few connections remaining, and this is one of them. And so taking into account the mapped wildlife corridor through that area, we feel would be an important consideration for this project. I think as in the current configuration, the corridor is likely to be significantly compromised to the point that it may not be a functional corridor any longer. There are some steps that can be taken. Again, it seems like from what I'm hearing just now that this is fairly far down the road. And so I don't know the extent to which any of the recommendations we made are applicable or possible. It certainly seems like it might have been better to address this at an earlier stage, but I guess we are where we are. And so it, from a kind of a landscape perspective, it seems like the northwestern corner of the property is likely the most functional kind of open area corridor, and that's where the I believe it's Glacier Court Street is proposed.
Yeah.
And that would, so I think keeping the forest area to the west of the property protected is a very good and important for this corridor connection, but without maintaining an avenue for wildlife to move north and south from that forest, its function is significantly limited. So our recommendations included things like considering the southern end of the property for some of that proposed development. It was unclear to us for many of the plans if that portion of the property had been evaluated or considered for development potential. Moving the Glacier Court development pod further to the east, closer to the intersection with a Mountain View Road there, to help, and then do some enhancement or corridor improvement along that northwestern corner area to provide access to the forested area.
Thank you, Aaron. I have a question for you, and then I'll ask if the commission has any other questions based on this report. And again, my compliments to you for a very thorough report. It was also very well written, and I actually enjoyed reading it for all of its sort of intricacies. So let me ask you if you've had a chance to review the recommendations that the town has made in the context of those plantings along the rec path, and if you had any sort of commentary based on that recommendation, because we're obviously not able to move the court based on the layout of the specific plan. Does the town's recommendation give any improvement to that habitat corridor that you're expressing concern over?
So I'm seeing two recommendations. One is for the street trees along Glacier Court, and another is related to the recreation path.
Correct.
Do I have that right?
Yeah.
So I guess I think, and I didn't have an opportunity to dig into this in any depth, but sort of off the cuff, I would say that I think the Glacier Court, if Glacier Court is located there, I think the potential for that area to be a wildlife corridor is pretty much eliminated, regardless of, I don't think there's much you can do for plantings that are going to improve that situation. I've certainly, some street trees or hedgerow wouldn't be a bad thing, but I don't think it's going to maintain the corridor in its capacity for kind of a high functioning wildlife use. I think a better, a more likely and probably better situation if the street stays where it's planned is that wildlife corridor is more to the east through the middle of the field or in that area, and kind of sweeps down between the two development pods in what's mapped as wetland area, crosses the path and enters the woods there. So I think the more likely scenario from a wildlife and habitat perspective benefit is going to be some kind of corridor improvement project through that more eastern area rather than trying to
That's
focus
what's
it.
on page 17, just to clarify.
Yeah, Aaron, that's on page 17, right? Where you showed the possibility of more of an eastern
That's
corridor.
correct. That's correct.
Thank you. Any other questions from the
And
commission?
then, and I'm sorry, and to the point about the recreation path, I think I'm not quite sure what the recommendation is suggesting here. I think following this more eastern corridor that then moves between the two pods, I think definitely some benefit could be had by some plantings along that path. I think the path is going to be an interruption to that, but having some forested area that comes close to both sides of the path would be a benefit. I would suggest there's a little recreation area kind of dead center halfway between the two pods along that path. If that could be moved closer to one of the two development areas, that would certainly be a benefit for wildlife area. It could have less activity, noise, scents, and and visual interruption there that would make it more appealing for wildlife to move through that area.
That's a helpful comment. I guess on that rec path recommendation, that is not going to be a very heavily used by my estimates rec path. It's basically just connecting the two pods. And as I understand it from the specific plan, that was like a fire code recommendation to be able to have egress through that. And that's my recollection. That path may not need to be gravel, or I mean, may not need to be paved. Would it ease your concerns if that were just like a maintained gravel path? Is that any more conducive to the corridor?
Yeah, I mean, we're kind of I think this assuming that we're talking about a 5-foot wide path or something like that. I think the surface is a little bit less important than the environment and the level of use and kind of the noise and the smells and certainly I would avoid any kind of night lighting or anything like that because that's going to significantly impact it. So I think a gravel path would be better. I don't think it would be make a wild difference.
One of the
I had a-
reasons. Oh, sorry. I was just gonna
Well,
say,
okay.
oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Gary.
No,
Go
I
ahead.
was just gonna say, related to that path, is that a trail that's kind of west of the building structure, entering the forested area? Is that what that is?
So the path is a rec path. So
No, I
Williston's
mean, yeah,
Right.
I'm referring to that small little two lines there
Yeah.
opposite the building. I mean, would that be better pushed to one, towards one set of houses versus another as well as the building?
Yeah, so the off the rec path, kind of in the middle, what you're
Yeah.
pointing to, Gary, is an easement to
Floating
the
easement.
town.
Oh,
So
okay. Yeah. So
town's
we can
gonna-
move that too. And would it help to move the trail itself like closer to the wooded area at all, or is it best to be in the middle of that open area? Or what do you suggest on that, Aaron?
It's a floating easement, right? So it's not mapped as a specific location.
Okay.
It's a representation.
Yeah.
If my memory serves me from the specific plan, that little idea of a spur is not a specific location. It's
You're down
Okay.
here, right?
Right, it's shown
Um,
in the, no, that's, I think, the edge of development.
no, up across from the square along the rec path.
Yeah, right
Yeah,
about there.
right there. There's basically at the bottom of that cursor. Yeah, there's a
Yeah,
little.
okay.
There's on the site plan, the specific plan. It shows
Page 2.
Yeah,
a
Just that
spur
little
headed
spur.
to the west,
Yeah.
basically there,
Mhm.
and that's a floating easement, not a specific location of a
Okay.
trail. Just representing the town in the future if we wanted to make a connection to the west because we have desire somehow to do that. That we would be able to work out a location.
Right.
So a lot of what's driving recreation or multi-use path on this project and many others is the town's official map. And we have parcels like this where we don't have a specific location. But you know, like in the case of this parcel, it's like the town is trying to find east-west connections that are off-road. And you know, sometimes the best you can do is, well, partially you're on a new residential street and then you're moving east-west, but also moving north-south a lot because that's just what works with the layout. But the fire department has a comment into the DRB wanting the path to be constructed in a way that it's drivable because it provides an emergency access between the two pods of development. We'll deal with that at the DRB. But the actual path or no path conversation comes out of the official map and long-range planning about connectivity.
Right, and part of this project, Glazer application has to score a 50-point growth management score, where the standard used to be 30, is now 40, so they have to go 10 points higher than the mandate, and building paths and trails as part of that score.
And I think that trail connection is a secondary, but a primary is also a rec path that's proposed along Mountain View. Right?
Yeah.
We've wanted for a very long time, so.
Yep, the rec path.
Either way, you're crossing a rec path to get north. Correct.
Even if we do habitat improvement on the corridor on the eastern side of the property, because that, I mean, like, it crosses the road.
Yeah, but they're at grade, like it was stated, minimal use. It will create a loop. There's a rec path on Old Stage, so you'd be able to walk into the neighborhood, the southern pod, cross that to the north through that cross-country run we were just discussing, up Glazer Court, and then you'll be able to turn east at that intersection with Mountain View Road, parallel with Mountain View, and then tie back into the town rec path at the corner of Old Stage and Mountain View there. So we'll create that loop.
Can you comment on Aaron's thought about the placement of that pickleball court and possible rec building?
So we've been just calling it a multi-use rec court. So I think there are some comments about pickleball and the noise. So the exact use of that court hasn't been determined, but during the specific plan, actually, there's quite a bit of discussion where that should be located. We thought it was kind of cool that it was in the middle of both. It will belong to the HOA of both. So that seemed to be the area where there's the most space. Can we shift it either direction? Sure, if the commission would like to see it shifted one way or the other. Now we have wetland buffers on both sides of that path that kind of bottleneck it as far as how far we can shift it each direction. But if the commission would like to see it shaded one way or the other, we can facilitate that. So there's no lighting proposed either.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah.
I guess my comment, David, would be that based on the HDA recommendations that essentially, and Aaron's comments, that essentially it's probably a moot point to try to really salvage the connectivity up Glazer Court, the northwest corner. It does seem like to me as though the best path forward to have a positive outcome is to see how much we can improve the connectivity from the west to the east through the wetlands. I did notice in the report that the wetlands were reported to be basically not particularly functional. They're just more like, everything was trying to be hayed and whatever couldn't be hayed because it was too wet, just stayed, but it's not particularly diverse, rich environment for wetland species. So from everything in the report, it seems as though in order for animals to feel comfortable crossing from the open space on the west side of the rec path to the wetlands on the east side, there needs to be some enhancement to the cover to feel like they can get through at least that far.
Yeah, what I would say about that piece is right now the farmer hays, there's no wetland buffer delineations out there, depending upon the type
Wherever
of
it's dry. Yeah.
Depending upon the way the season is how far down the hill he goes, right? He starts at the top and works his way down. there is, you know, a decently sized wooded area kind of in the middle where, you know, it's been wet for a very long time as you get to the lowest point in that area.
Wetland shrubs and small trees. and
Right,
stuff.
so with this project, the buffers will be demarcated permanently. We're
Yeah.
proposing boulders, spaced 30 feet on center, so hopefully that's acceptable. But with that demarcation and that land being taken under ownership with covenant restrictions for cutting and mowing and what have you, that area will have the opportunity to grow up naturally. So that area is not part of the open space to be dedicated to the town for continued use of Windswept Farm.
Mhm.
So the 15 acres along Mountain View is being dedicated to the town, which we expect the town will allow them to continue to hay and maintain that area as it's historically been done. But within that class 2 wetland buffer where the corridor is being suggested, that should be able to grow up naturally, you know, indefinitely into the future.
Could we make a recommendation that the multi-use court get shifted and like you could figure out how to do it?
Sure.
We wouldn't have to like specify where, and that plans be made to enhance some version of connectivity that looks like this, but might shift depending on the movement of the court. Like the, do you know what I mean? That like some S-shaped enhancement happen.
Yeah,
I don't know how to word that, such
Yeah.
a recommendation, but
There might have to be a couple, like maybe multiple recommendations for the different
yeah,
areas. Like one would be enhancing the buffer on the west side of the rec path. And then shift another one for shifting the multi-use court, either north or south, depending on what's feasible to widen the connection, the corridor.
Can the multi-use court, be moved, to a totally different pod and still have it be consistent with the plan? I'm looking at Matt and Emily. Ooh, bless you.
I think that is tricky. I know it was talked about with through the specific plan process. It would be closer to the homes, and I think the intent is a rec court where there might be some recreational noise, keeping it farther from backyards.
To that point of Aaron's though, that's why it makes it damaging to the
Mhm.
sort of corridor that we're trying to sort of,
The noise aspect.
yeah.
yeah,
So, not to complicate things too much, but it could be worth the development review board discussing like the elimination of that court. If it still achieves that 50-point score. The requirement for these recreation facilities comes out of that growth management score for provide neighborhood space. They're still providing the community building. Maybe something adjacent to the community building is proposed instead of the rec court.
Where's the community building?
It's on the multi, or the two loop.
Okay,
the loop
yeah, I think I
road.
see it on the north side
Yes,
of the loop.
yeah, on the civil set, there's a community building. And then the community parking lot that serves as the sustainable transportation, carpool share lot. So I think there is a fair discussion with the development review board. Does eliminating this multi-recreation court, can the
Actually
project still
improve.
achieve a 50-point score, or could something else be provided closer to the neighborhood building that achieves that 50-point score?
I mean, one thought is that I see a duplex right next to that community building.
On the other side.
And if you just drop if you drop that duplex further, I guess, east, because we're looking at this a little bit, we're looking at this at 90 degrees.
sorry.
So that's okay. No, it's
Down.
fine. But, and,
Big
and-
parcel, you gotta fit it somehow.
yeah, and if you just sort of squeeze the multi-use court in there, you've solved the corridor issue and you still have it seems like there would be space. I mean, I'm not a planner, right? But-
It's a little tight. The main staff report's gonna talk about that proposed parking lot and the 25-foot setback, but that's a side thing that the DRB can work out.
Yeah, so I would just say
There's also the community garden area that could be shifted and then something placed next to it, on the
Where's the community garden?
both can you zoom in on the,
Yeah.
The main issue is this is like a noise, and if there's no lighting there, we're less concerned about like evening use, but like, you know, if it's a noise and general traffic of that's disturbing that corridor, then it seems like if you put like a garden in place of the pickleball court, that might alleviate it. I don't know, I'd look to Aaron for that if that would be a reasonable swap out.
I think like a general recommendation to the DRB that says, if this multi-use court can be eliminated and it still achieves a 50-point score in growth management, or can that community building and the community gardens in that 57-unit loop be enhanced to meet that 50-point score, that would be ideal, because then you would still be getting your 50-point score and enhancing this corridor by not having the recreation.
Yeah.
Activity on the base.
Can we draft that language and look at it?
We had scored 52, so there
Yeah.
is some
Potentially wiggle room.
wiggle room.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think leaving it up
Can you
to,
write something, Emily?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
or even Word document, something we can just share real quick and then.
Yeah, if we can leave it up to
live
date.
it for you guys.
Cause I don't feel like we need to do the moving. I think
No,
we
no, no.
No.
just need to figure out, like,
Just
we
thinking
want
through.
that sweep to be maintained.
Yeah.
Yep.
Where is the garden in this?
So there's two, there's one in the northwest corner.
Next to the rec path.
There's one there, and there's
Okay.
one here.
Okay.
So
Whether it's swapping
you know,
locations or
this one
eliminating
gets
things.
kinda- This area is quite a bit bigger and better, in my opinion, than this one. So maybe this one gets moved, you know, somewhere along here and it gets, you know, substantially larger to mimic the other one.
Mhm. Yep, whatever works for points and eliminates a little bit of traffic and noise
Yeah,
in the corridor. I do appreciate that, the wetland is likely to improve in some ways, in terms of the way it's being managed.
Tell you what, while that's being drafted, let's talk about the wetland and the
Yeah.
demarcation, the infamous boulders, 30-foot placements. I don't have a problem with the boulders personally, as I've been reading this though, and the importance of not mowing that area. Is it possible to affix, you know, with bolts, signage to those boulders that said, you know, like maybe every other boulder, it has wetland, no mow. You know, something like that, like makes it a little bit more permanent than, cause we had, you know, you have neighbors come in and then all of a sudden, next thing you know, is like they're mowing around the boulders, and then the boulders become part of like the landscaping, and then, you know, but the mowing continues, you know what I mean?
I think we've had boulders in the past. Because in a way that, because we felt like the mowers couldn't get, like the commercial mowers couldn't get past them, is that accurate?
Well, that's a lot
It's a
smaller.
lot of mowers, you'd have to
Yeah,
space
yeah.
them like, I don't think we got that tight, that would be like 6 foot spacing or
Yeah.
something.
That'd be really tight.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think our most relevant experience has been over at Creek's Edge off of North Williston Road. You can definitely drive a mower in between the boulders if you want to. And what our experience actually was the first couple of years, the mowing contractor was mowing around the boulders.
Exactly.
And a few residents reached out and said, hey, these boulders are really ugly. Why are these boulders here? I don't like looking at them. And I said, well, if you just don't mow around them, the grass will be taller than the boulders and you won't see them anymore. And just encourage them to work with their mowing contractors. They just stay on the inside edge of the boulders, which is what they've done in the last few seasons. So it kind of worked itself out. We have done wetland buffer, no mow signage before as well. I think typically that's been when we've had a fence, but a couple of signs will
Interspersed with
can
boulders.
help. I do think in association managed developments where you're just dealing with one mowing contractor, it's a lot easier. I get a lot more concerned if we're platting individual lots and we're gonna have, 50 homeowners making 50 different decisions about what they do. Those kinds of subdivisions in Williston is where we see people like, oh, look at this way cool path I mowed down to the river, and it's like, you're not supposed to do that. Gary's gonna stand up.
Well, I just had a comment about the boulders. I'm wondering if 30 feet is too far apart. I mean, I think particularly in those, 3 or 4 places where there's a condo right backed up to the thing, I'm wondering if we need to have them closer than that, because I don't know, I remember numerous times where they just went around the boulder instead of mowing back in, and I don't know, what do you guys think?
Yeah, 30 feels really, especially given the contour lines that this is trying to follow, 30 does feel pretty long to
It might be
me.
kind of inexact.
Yeah, so maybe a tighter spacing where it's closer to
Yeah.
the
Yeah,
structures.
when it's important, most important, yeah.
Yeah, so generally speaking, wetland rules require demarcation if you're within 25 feet. So that's generally what we tried to do. If the commission wants to see, maybe 10-foot spacing if we're within 10 feet or something, just remind that it's a 50-foot buffer.
Mhm.
The wetland is 50 feet inside of that. So
Right.
not that you plan for homeowners getting into that area, but if they do, there's 50 feet.
Oh, they will. They will. It seems like we have a history of them doing that. They'll try, and so anything to make that harder to do or make it more obvious that they shouldn't do it, I think might benefit us.
I'm not hearing any concern over the boulders as a recommendation, maybe dropping it down to the spacing from 30 to 10 or 15 feet, based
Where there's,
on,
yeah.
proximity.
Adjacent.
which is almost everywhere in this plan. candidly, but,
Well, there's a few
I mean-
spots where closer than others for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess you do have to work, consider the fact that if there's haying going on the northern parcel, that, that's more than just mowing activity, that's haying, just as is the current practice, and so.
That's true.
How would these boulders, discourage haying past their placement? Would this be a clear marker for the haying?
The town would, the open space proposed at the north is supposed to be town owned in the end, right?
That's correct.
Yes.
So the town would,
And the applicant said that the assumption is that the town will allow continued haying of that spot.
Mhm. Yeah, so that it would be working it out with Public Works on how to make sure that we're not going into the buffer on that area.
And the buffer would be off lot too.
So
So the
yeah,
buffers and wetlands are out in the HOA land.
it's true.
So are there gonna be boulders placed on those wetland, that northern wetland?
We're showing them adjacent to the residential units. We're not showing them further east. All the way to the old stage road.
Okay, I mean, I guess I would raise that for the commission's consideration. I think we should make a recommendation that there be some kind of demarcation on that northern spur, because it seems very possible that the haying of the north field could impede that wetland area.
If we did do something there, maybe birdhouses. I know you folks see quite a bit, but something that sticks up a little bit more. If it's hayed and it's a cubic yard boulder, you might not see it.
Mhm.
So potentially a birdhouse on a 4x4 foot post spaced, 50 feet or something like that, considering it's just for hey farmer, you're getting close to the property line sort of thing, not
Yeah.
trying to keep residents out from dumping leaves and stuff.
I like it.
With signage, could you add signage to them?
We've done signage in the past, yeah. Usually the signage is like 100 feet more, if you come across this boundary, you can kind of see a sign on both sides if you get close enough where, if you're interested in what it says, you're gonna go see, not necessarily have to walk right down.
The main point sort of being that whatever is put there is a clear indicator to who's haying that north field, that they can't hay into the.
Yeah.
Well, this is the property boundary essentially, because the
Yeah.
property boundary basically follows that wetland buffer.
It does purpose.
Yeah.
But not fencing, because the whole point of this is to allow.
Right.
Court.
Yeah, I think birdhouses every 100 feet for an agricultural use, you know, I think we'd be fine with, within that area. And it's roughly 250, 350, 600, yeah, it's 1,000 feet, that whole.
So it might be 10.
Boundary, might be 10 of them, yeah.
Okay, do we have a?
If I could offer one other suggestion.
Please, Aaron, go ahead.
Yeah, it might be, so on the area where the recreation or pickleball court is shown currently, under the assumption that that is being moved to some extent, I'm thinking that that little field area is probably going to become, with the wetland buffer being marked over there, it's going to become pretty unviable for agriculture. And so if you were to bring that line of that no mow line all the way up to the path or close to the path, rather than following the wetland buffer kind of in a U-shaped away from the path, that would be an improvement for that corridor area, allowing woody vegetation to grow up all the way up to the path.
And discourage mowing back from the rec path further toward the wetland.
So have those no mow boulders sort of be marked essentially along the path if the rec.
Along the path rather
Yeah.
than following the wetland buffer over there, yeah.
Okay.
So Aaron,
That's-
what would that be, 100-foot long piece of the path that you'd suggest, minimal, or what does it have to be to enhance that wildlife corridor?
I would do as much as you possibly can. I mean, we typically think of like a 300-foot width as you know, kind of a minimum ideal situation for in terms of, like, you know, visibility and good buffers for noise. But I would do as much of it as you possibly can. And if you're moving that recreation court, I would say try to do, you know, the whole length of that path through what's now there.
So basically, we treat that part as a wetland buffer essentially, and put all the appropriate boulders and whatever around it.
Yep.
Great.
So what that's doing is it's creating a fairly narrow crossing between what's eventually going to be woods and what is currently woods. And so you've got it, you know, it makes for a much more permeable wildlife situation.
Yeah, that's really helpful.
Thank you.
Let's look at some words.
Yep.
Yeah, Matt and I have a shared document going. I
Great.
do want to note on that growth management score, so it was anticipated at the specific plan process that neighborhood design would get 9 points and neighborhood space would get 7 points. The criteria for neighborhood design does include, creative use of buffering. So I think here saying that we're eliminating that multi-use court from that path area enhances the buffering for wildlife purposes.
That
Could
could
So I
qualify.
think maybe if
Yeah.
even if it loses a point in neighborhood space for dropping the rec court, it's probably gonna gain a point in neighborhood design.
Yeah.
Or it can gain points, doing something else by the community
Yeah,
building.
then we got 2 to spare, so even if it's close.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know, I would be very happy to see that. I like that suggestion, Aaron. I was trying to figure out, I know we have a drafted recommendation already that was talking about the buffer on the west side of the rec path to make sure that it was really robust, but on the east side, I wasn't as sure how we would do that. So let's look at the words.
Number 4 is a trailing sentence.
Yeah, just didn't get it all done
Okay.
before
No, that's
the
okay. We can.
call to care was. So I think just between the forested area to the west. Never mind. West and the wetland area to the northeast. Following the, what do we call it, alternate wildlife travel corridor shown in the HDA.
On page 17, if you want.
Always auto corrects HDA had.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Any comments on numbers, 1 through 4 here by the commission?
I like it.
For number 2, the only thing I was looking at, I like the 30-foot spacing. I think it's fine for areas that are not adjacent to housing. The 10 feet when the structure's within 10 feet, I sort of feel like even if a structure is 20 feet from the buffer, I might want to see closer spacing. So how would the applicant team feel about if structures are within 20 feet of the buffer doing the 10-foot boulder spacing?
So the demarcation, what we've done with the wetland rules in the past is within 25 feet. So if it's 20 feet. Really not, I'm just saying like.
Not much different.
Yeah, except for basically that would then say that it's 10 feet for the whole time, you know, so.
Oh,
The
okay.
standard is 30 at 25, so just saying 10 at 20
Okay.
is a pretty substantial change.
Yeah, I can see
I'd be
that.
more comfortable with the 10 feet personally, but.
Are the other commissioners okay with that? I just,
Is there merit saying not necessarily the structure, but its area of exclusive use, because it shows like what's probably a footprint for a deck. And then the exclusive use backyard area,
Like you're saying, directly behind the unit.
yeah,
right, yeah, cause there's the unit line
Yeah.
and then that.
But that would all qualify, I mean, that's within 10 feet, so that would all be. And then the units are spaced roughly 15, 20 feet, so.
so what wording, Emily,
I can share that
account
up
for
again,
that.
sorry.
No worries.
I was gonna have
Um,
Emily share the picture, but.
I would say within footprint lot,
Within 10, yeah, when the buffer's within 10 feet of a footprint lot.
yeah, cause
That makes
your
sense,
typical multifamily unit on footprint lot,
Well, if it matches, but yeah, that may be more
instead
comfortable.
of structure.
Yeah.
Say footprint lot. To a footprint lot, yeah, that I think works.
And then number 3 needs a spacing indication of the signposts, birdhouses, etc. I think you were saying if you did one every 100 feet on that portion,
50, I thought.
it would be 10, right? Because you said it's about 1,000 feet
Yeah.
along that.
And we could space them, even if it's not exactly 100 foot, but we could space them so they're, you know, picking up that irregular shape.
Right.
So there might be spaces where they are a little closer together because it makes some angles, but we could show those on a plan, so it's known where they're gonna be.
Is 100 feet the right amount there, or is it?
So like I was thinking, like, even if the spacing isn't perfect, but you know, maybe it looks something like this, like maybe they're
There's a
closer
four
together
there.
here because it's kind of that angle, and then where it's a straight line, maybe you don't need as many.
Could we say the number instead of the spacing?
Yeah,
No fewer than 10
Yeah.
yeah,
to mark the irregular shape.
yeah, that's good.
Great. How do you feel about that, David? Sorry.
Yeah. I would have also gone with either, 50 to 100 feet spacing based on,
Yeah,
the irregular shape.
I'm fine with that. I think it achieves the same thing.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll just, what we would do is, for the DRB, we would have the language say final plans must show.
Yeah.
And just require it's on the plan so that we can, see it there and then go make sure it goes in.
Excellent. I'm just reading the 4th one again.
I have a question for Aaron. Aaron, we talked about putting the boulders along the east side of the rec path to allow the area to grow up. Is there any plantings to accelerate that area? Improving that you would recommend that are kind of relatively low effort, but would increase the rate at which it improved?
Certainly plantings would help it improve quicker. I would say probably more important than plantings is some level of invasive species management. Just to let natural native vegetation get a foothold before the invasives take over. I think that would probably be a recommendation I would make ahead of plantings.
Okay.
If plantings were a recommended piece, and it's not a bad idea. I think it would certainly enhance it. I would say to make sure that you're including some conifer species in there because that's going to be the better kind of visual auditory break that the wildlife would prefer.
So do you wanna make that recommendation, Reed, to?
I'm thinking.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm also wondering, like, does it go in with these recommendations or is it?
Right, good question.
separate-
This is not replacing the full set of recommendations, right? This is just what we're adding to the current
Correct.
Yes.
recommendations, so we could go back to the
Right,
staff recommendations and their planting recommendation to add something like that.
cause right now, isn't there a recommendation that,
Yes, provide supplemental plantings between the street trees in a staggered pattern along Glazer Court to enhance the function of the hedgerow as a wildlife corridor. Plant species that align with recommendations of the
Yeah.
HDA.
yeah,
Now, if we're not trying to maintain that north-south corridor along Glazer Court, I'm just wondering, is it, yeah.
So in addition to the street trees, there's also that segment of the type 3 or the type 2 buffer.
Oh, that's right.
Which might
That's
not make
B.
sense in that area
That's
because it's a
1B.
dense, tall cedar hedge. And that's south of Glazer Courts. I think that's an area too where the plantings could be different to be species that
Mhm.
are
That's fine.
preferable
Yeah.
for the HDA.
Mhm.
And I think that space can fit a 23-foot type 3 buffer, which is different heights of trees as opposed to a dense hedge.
Mhm. Yeah, I think,
Can we just maybe add to that, with, it's, right now it's the rec pass and the western property boundary, but I think what we're suggesting is that some of those plantings also be to the east of the rec path as well.
Mhm.
on both sides of the rec path.
On
so
both
it's got
sides of-
Cover.
Exactly,
To
both sides of
Yeah,
the rec
both
path.
sides.
I just wanna raise something, did Eric leave yet? Eric, are you still on?
I don't think he's here.
Cause I'm
I've
gonna.
got a couple folks on. the phone.
Oh,
Yeah. he's on
Can you
the
hear
phone.
me?
Okay.
He's on the phone.
Yes. Super, okay, cause I'm
Yeah,
gonna have to
can you hear
go, yes, and I just wanted to make sure there was gonna be a quorum
Yeah.
before it.
Okay.
We also, we do
Yes,
have to wrap this up.
I am back on. All right.
Okay.
There's, those cell phone challenges in Williston, cell phone coverage.
I just didn't wanna like leave and then have us do all this and not be able to vote.
No, okay.
Great,
I'm gonna,
Thank you.
okay, so
sorry,
we're.
I have to go to an on-campus meeting.
We're looking at some quick modifications to recommendation number 1, which is about supplemental plantings.
Are we talking type 3 buffer on both sides of the rec path or? What do we wanna do here?
So that's A. I'm actually okay with A, and then on B, I think. So A is good as you just modified it, Emily, I think.
Oh, wait, no, hold on. B was what I was thinking.
Okay,
Never mind.
Okay.
I got confused.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's-
Maybe just supplemental plantings, because landscaping buffers are meant to exactly do that, buffer,
Right.
restrict. You know,
Restrict,
stop,
yeah,
you know, so if we just do. I was thinking 1A, maybe instead of referencing Glazer Court, which it sounded like Aaron wasn't a huge fan of, maybe that can just be changed to reference the rec path.
yeah, I just wanna
So just-
redirect resources from areas that aren't gonna add value to areas that are gonna add value,
Yeah, yeah.
So we're
basically, yeah.
probably just striking 1A because we have
The
3,
other-
4, and 5, and 6.
Mhm.
Okay,
Okay, and then,
yeah, Glazer Court doesn't seem important from our perspective at this point. So then adjust that to say, I think we agree with you on the type 3 buffer. But to enhance the function of the wildlife corridor, it's the western property. Oh, add something to the end of that sentence that, or somewhere in there that reflects plantings on the east side of the rec path as well.
On the west and east,
West
on
and
both
east.
sides of the rec path.
right, so I changed, number 6 for the segment of rec path. This is just about clearing, so we want plantings along it as well.
Yeah, we're saying to do supplemental plantings rather than putting new stuff along Glazer Court. We're saying put it along the east and west side of the rec path.
Yeah, so you could simplify that by saying plantings along the east and west side of the path.
And if we want to say why, we can say to enhance the cover for wildlife movement. But that's the reasoning.
I got it. Yeah.
Mhm.
Good with that, Gary? Eric, you're gonna have to take our word for it.
Yeah, I'm good with it.
I will take your word for it. I've been able to follow along. I obviously can't look at the maps while I'm driving, but I follow along. That sounds good.
I'm gonna take out the width standards because I think it makes sense to do plantings on both sides of the path, but then it might not be that 23-foot width. It might be
On each side.
It might be that spacing of a type 3 buffer along each side of the path, which would be wider than the 23-foot.
Yeah, it's just using that planting pattern essentially on both sides to soften that up.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Great. So can we get a motion then to approve these recommendations as amended?
So moved.
Thank you. Looking to Gary or Eric.
I'll second.
Thanks,
Sure.
Gary.
Second. You got it. All right.
Okay. We'll vote then, put it to the vote. All in favor of approving these recommendations as amended?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? See, no one else is here to vote, so that's 4 in favor. Motion carries.
And I'm sure you'll note, Matt, that Kim wasn't here for that vote.
Yeah,
Yeah, thank you. Aaron, thank you for the really great HDA and thanks to the applicants for coming in to look at it with us.
I'll make a Zoom meeting so early.
Yes, there you go. Now you have a whole day ahead of you.
We don't see that.
Yeah, no more late night meetings here.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you, Aaron.
Have a nice holiday.
Good luck with
thank
the
you.
rest of the process.
Take care. Thanks.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Yeah, appreciate
Do
it.
you have a moment, Brian, on the other?
Okay, with
Brian
the
is
time
the
that we
office
have left, really appreciate our colleagues from CVU joining us this morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you so much. Thanks for
Morning.
the additional time. I hope that was interesting at least. I don't know.
Look behind the curtain.
Yeah. All right. Who wants to tee this one up?
Stan, do you want to just kind of mention where we are at in the process, and then we can talk about the some of the proposed activities that we would love to do with some students and see what the classes are interested in the upcoming sessions.
Yeah, that would be great. Hi, everybody. Thanks for having us again. Or I know I was with you. I don't know if it was back in May or June or exactly whenever it was. But just as a quick reminder, one of the things we were looking to do is to, in short, try to figure out how to use CVU as, I don't know, more of a resource for the community in kind of a win-win type of way, chances to get students, individual students or classes doing some real work in the community and also obviously some learning. And so starting to look at some partnerships that we could develop to connect. So I have Heather Morley and Dave Trevithick here, who would be the teachers and who will really be able to talk about this in a language that will make sense to you all and likewise. So I will tee them up, but the goal is we've met, meaning Heather, Dave, and I have met and, looked at the list and had talked about the different things that we had talked about at our last meeting about some of your projects. They've looked at their class and especially what things towards the spring are like. And so this seemed like the perfect time to then bring all of you together.
Thanks, Dan. So what we're really thinking that our capacity for this spring is we'd like to focus on the stories of land management in Williston and get from you a list of 6 to 10 community members, their contact information, and just a quick blurb on what it is that they've done in the past that you're interested in getting their story, just so we can match kids with those stories appropriately. You want to add to that?
Yeah, I think as we've done a lot of projects with community members, when we're getting that list, it's always just a good idea to think about who would be really good chatting with children, with kids, because I've had a lot of community members for natural resources where it seems like a good fit, and then what they feel like they're going to be getting out of it is a little different than what we're looking for. We're really looking for a really great educational experience. But at the same time, we want that community partner to come away with, oh, I really even learned a lot by just going through that with those kids. So just keeping that in mind when we're thinking about those community partners.
Yeah. I think one thing to know is that many of the community, especially the rural landowners that we hope to connect with, some of them we may not have much information on. So if you're looking for a short list of community contacts to do interviews with that we feel like we do have information on, we might have some, but I don't know if we have.
I was actually,
we have a few.
It sounds actually more like the interviews would be more geared towards the residents of the town who have already conserved their land. So like Sipple Farm, the McCulloughs, Terry, a former commissioner who, has gone through that process of conserving land. Is that more aligned with what you're thinking? Obviously, we have contact information for them.
Sure. I mean, I think we're looking at anyone who has, a relationship with the land. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a big landowner. It could be somebody who, has spent a lifetime hunting and fishing too in the area, and to be able to share those stories.
Yeah. Okay. That could give the WCC some a little bit to chew on. Figure out what to present. I could imagine we might bring to you a list that has perhaps a little variety, maybe some folks that we don't have a strong connection with, but maybe have contacted the town and expressed interest in future conservation of their land. Yeah. Maybe some folks who have a strong connection to the outdoor areas across Williston, and maybe some others who have done conservation work or permanently conserved
We should
land.
also think about outdoor recreation too. I mean,
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think that would be a big connection. There's a lot of that.
Yeah, we
Rita,
can work with that.
I was thinking of Chapin as well. I think that'd be a great, great
Oh, yeah.
person to work with.
He's not getting out of this.
There's a lot of like varying levels of professionality, but various people who have put a lot of time and effort into either education or management of invasives, management of wildlife populations. We have folks who are right now making a documentary about the beaver activity in Williston and the history of it. So we have a lot of people who have connections that might be interesting to talk with students. Hopefully the students would get something out of it, and we'd get some documentation of those stories. So
that sounds great. Our class starts in mid-January, and we see those kiddos 2 to 3 days a week for the full day. And we're looking to kind of jump into this project pretty quickly.
Yep.
Right. So if that timeline works for you, getting us those names and the contact information by like the middle of January would be pretty perfect for us.
Okay. I think it's feasible, and I've volunteered to kind of spearhead whatever the first project is, so I can be your point of contact with the Conservation Commission if that's agreeable to the other commissioners. And what I would do, Matt, then is I'll start drafting a list and just circulate it to the commission and just ask if anybody wants to add names.
Can we do that?
Yeah, it's not business, official business.
It's just, hey, send it out. Hey, everybody, here it is.
Right back to Reed if you have ideas.
Right back to Reed.
Yeah.
And you're okay with open meeting law that way.
Great. Yeah. No, we're not making any decisions. We're just brainstorming.
Yep.
Ideas. So I'll get that started, and I'll target early January to get you all, Heather and Dave, something that you can look at with your students. I'll try to get name, contact information, and where they're located in town and kind of why they're on the list.
Great.
Let's try to have like a nice mix of like, you know, folks like Terry who are very like conservation oriented, and then, you know, Simple Farm, which is a working farm, and then, you know, I would even put Nick Warner on the list, you know.
Yeah, he has a different perspective.
Right,
Yeah.
you know, preserving land for recreation, and then, you know, like a mountain bike, you know, mountain bike.
Somebody from Fellowship of the Wheel, they have
Yeah.
particular,
Yeah.
yeah,
Somebody
we have
from
various
Fellowship,
folks.
and obviously then you've got Jim. I mean, it's already like half.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
I don't know, is talking to Jim educational or just interesting?
yes. Okay, good. Are there any other, I know we gave you kind of like a long list, through Stan at least of, you know, here's like, I think we gave like 10 or 12 ideas. I think there were a couple others on there that were garnering some interest. Are there others you're looking at for the spring, or maybe for, I know there's like an intensive study period too that some students do at the end of the year. Are there other projects that we should start planning for?
Yeah, there's so we would like to kind of focus on just this piece for the first one. We have some ideas around signage, specifically around certain species.
Yeah.
'Cause kiddos do like a critter project, so we might, you know, mess around with that a little this first semester, but
Yeah.
then see if it works moving forward. The RISE program at CVU that happens at the end of May and into the first week of June might be another opportunity. And I can hook you up with the Nexus people, the ones who help kids who are doing independent studies.
Yeah.
And let them know that if they are interested, that there are some projects here.
Yeah, at a very high level, some of the wildlife issues that I think Williston could use signage, and maybe it's not even signage, maybe it's more like public awareness campaign stuff, like writing things to go in Front Porch Forum, writing things to go on the Williston website, things like that, where we have bear, obviously, is a major topic of discussion around town, is bear in town. People seem very fascinated with bobcats.
Yeah.
And some people are afraid that they're a danger to them or their children or their pets, and other people hope to see them more. So that's an interesting one. And then coyotes also, there's a lot of different views on that. And then beaver is the fourth one. So that we could go on, but I think at a minimum, we've got like 3 or 4 different species that would be interesting for students to look into. The biology and ecology side, but also into the human interaction side, and learn a little bit about how to raise awareness in public awareness about those animals and how to think about or how to interact with them.
Sure. Our kiddos are already doing that work, so we'll work with our English teacher liaison for this and see if maybe publishing some of that, not on signs, but maybe on the internet through those avenues you suggested might work better.
Yeah.
But we'll connect with her before we promise.
Yeah, the only reason I brought up the signage in the past was I know that there's some fabrication capabilities at the school, and I didn't know if there was a connection where like they're looking for practical things to actually create, and if we had, you know, some students create language, then in future semesters or years maybe they could fabricate signs. So thought that might be a connection for the future.
Great.
Okay, so we won't think too hard about that one right now. We can regroup maybe later in the spring to see whether there are independent studies or classes that want to contribute content on those topics. But for now, I'll work on a short list for the storytelling and interview engagement.
And
Okay,
Reed,
that's perfect. Thanks.
Reed, I remember, I don't have the list in front of me, but I think for the RISE that you were talking about, the end of the year program, the couple that had jumped out were the more like hands-on. There was some actual like work on the trails or things.
Oh yeah. Yeah, and there's Chapin, so my father Chapin does a ton of invasives management across the town. I mean, he just spends countless hours a year going out and literally pulling, cutting, stump treating, just like working on invasives. It's really hard in Williston to get community members to go do that just because of the volunteer insurance situation. But through the schools, if it's a school project, the school's insurance covers those students. So if there are students who are interested in learning about invasives, how to treat them, and actually doing some hands-on work, we have endless amounts to deal with. And he told me the other day that he would love to have some students to be able to take from CBU. And we have Abazi Menahanek, this Tree Island parcel near Allenbrook School in Williston, that he's been creating a urban forest on. And so we planted hundreds of trees, and then we're trying to reduce the invasives to allow the local area to just naturally develop. And so he said he could easily spend unlimited hours with students, whoever's interested, going out and doing invasives removal there and identification work.
Great. And I can, one of the things I can do is I can speak with Peter Booth, who runs RISE, and he knows there's a list of teachers who already kind of have their ideas and put in proposals. And then there are those who are kind of spinning right now and trying to, come up with exactly they want to do, to kind of put that as an option out to those people. And Dave, who I see is still here, feeling you may know some students who would jump into what Reed was just talking about.
Sure. In my natural resources course, it doesn't have as much of the time, like the full day time that Field and Forest has, but natural resources, there's students looking for those projects as well. And it's a matter of figuring out timing during the school day. They can leave during my class, but if it has to be extended, I'm not sure what I'm meeting. It might be first block next semester, which would actually be kind of ideal. But I got to take a look at who's in that class and what kind of what might fit really well. So I still have that list that you said, and I'm definitely going to put that up when we start talking about projects for those kids as well.
Great. Looking forward to working with you all. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Great. Thank you.
Take care.
Thanks, guys.
Okay, well, I think that's our agenda. We got through it amazingly somehow. And so we'll plan on having at least a small contingent of us at the meeting on the 7th to represent our recommendation for the $150,000 ERF funding. Sounds like it'll be Eric, Reed, and myself. Anything to close that topic out? I don't have anything further.
Just thinking about in terms of if we want to organize anything in terms of a presentation for that day at the select board. And I know Eric's always connecting to audio. Eric's getting back on Zoom, so maybe we can ask him based on his experience in the past few years, what we should bring, if anything, for.
I mean, I'm totally comfortable speaking to the memo, but Eric, if you have any other thoughts.
See if he's connected. Can you hear us, Eric?
Yep, I can.
Okay.
I've been listening. I think I would definitely recommend putting together just some bullet points from the memo. I don't know that it's worth like just reading the memo to them. They'll have it in front of them, but just some high level bullet points and maybe some just open the door for the conversation. I could think about having a separate item in the budget for the ERF funding for the depending on the tax rate or whatever we want to call it. I think that'd be fine. And the current select board has been there for a while, so they know, they're familiar with the story, and I don't think we need to go into a lot of detail.
Eric, what do you think about bringing a couple examples of how we would use the money if it was in the account? I'm thinking about things that wouldn't hopefully be touchy subjects. For instance, now that Glazer it's a specific plan and it's working its way through, I think we can just objectively say that had we had the money when that parcel was proposed for development, we probably would have attempted to preserve a significant portion of it. That's like one concrete example. I'm just thinking spewing the facts at them more than just reading the memo. I don't know is actually going to change their opinion, but talking through some examples, talking about the fact that we've been approached by some folks between the Gateway South, between the Growth Center and Sucker Brook. We have a few different landowners who have interest in preserving their land, but none of them are the kind of thing where like a land trust is going to come in because they're small. Maybe they're only medium priority, but maybe if there's a few of them, we can do something that if something
Is
like
that public? Can we actually say that in public?
I think we can't say who, but we can say that there are landowners in that
Yeah.
corridor who have approached us and if we want to do something like create a connection where people can walk from the growth center, hike from the growth center up to Five Tree Hill, lookout, you can't do that if you don't have the money in the account to get that lined up with the various landowners to make those connections. So those are the types of stories I was hoping to like bring a story rather than just telling them what's in the memo.
Yeah, I think, I talked to Andrew a little bit a while ago about, trying to tell the story about that the cost of achieving land conservation continues to go up. The opportunities are limited. The old saying about land, they're not making any more of it.
And they're unpredictable.
And timing is really hard to align, and you're often dealing with a group of owners, a family that's trying to make what's often a very hard decision. And basically the more resource the town has at its disposal in a fast sort of way, the easier the town can make a conservation decision for people who are faced with wanting to make one. And so it's a little bit about the map and what the remaining opportunities are, and Reed, to your point of like stitching together smaller, medium priority things that end up providing some functional value to the town. It's a little bit about the cost of this is not going down. The opportunities are not increasing, they're decreasing as development happens. And I think we will see continued, development pressure in Williston. I mean, that's Williston's reality from 50 years ago until forever. And so having a good fund in the bank makes the town more agile and more able to respond to those opportunities when they show up.
Yeah.
Yep.
I
agree 100%, Matt. That's exactly what I was going to suggest. And I think it wouldn't hurt to remind them of sorry, Matt, what is it? The 2050 vision for Williston, which is, in my perspective, is essentially for Williston to become the next city in Vermont, and conserving the land around that city is very important to maintaining the more rural nature that we enjoy right now in Williston.
Yeah, I think the other thing I would add to that is, Williston, as you experience today and through many processes, has an incredibly robust development review process that balances open space interests when somebody is going to develop. But that's, once you're in a development review process, you are making compromises, and we have areas of town like the Glazer property that are sitting in a zone that's served by water and sewer, and by virtue of the town's own planning and the planning the state has gone and done for the town are targeted for significant residential growth at this point. Through Act 181, the density limits were raised by the state of Vermont under a housing goal. So you've regulated in so many dimensions in Williston really well, really assertively. Regulation gets you as far as it gets you, but you're working in a system of compromise with, some land being impacted and some land being developed. The counterbalance to that is to have a robust preservation and conservation program. And if you really want to control it, possession is 9/10 of the law, right? And it's a reality that Williston faces.
Right. We can't just count on donations as developments come up.
Right. I mean, Glazer, I'm really pleased with the process as it's playing out. I think it's been an incredibly strong community conversation and process. But if you tasked me with designing a more complicated way for the town to end up owning some open space, I'm not sure I could come up with it.
And more painful in some ways, the number of hearings and yeah.
You know, so we've got a really adept staff that's helped the town navigate that, very complicated process. But it's a lot faster and easier sometimes to write a check. And, we started our conversations with the Glazers with always introducing it with saying, the first thing is we'd really love to just conserve all of this land. We'd love it if we could just buy this thing and we could have,
Or buy 3/4 of it and why don't you develop this piece that's of less habitat value
And so, one of the things about open space funding is, it's different from a lot of other things. Municipalities, governments aren't in the habit of carrying around giant reserves, right? Because your taxpayers eventually are like, well, why are you sitting on all that money? And then you're taxing me more and more. And when you do sit on big reserves for something, there needs to be like a really good reason. And I think part of the story is, well, because of the nature of how open space is acquired, this is a really good reason to sit on a reserve. So somebody says, well, hey, there's $500,000 in that fund. Why do you want more? And it's like, well, because we want to go out, that money's for spending. We want to go out and spend it. We want to have enough that we can do it when the time is right. So I think you're right too, whoever said, the select board's heard a lot of this before. I think that's true, but I think it's good to continue to go in and tell that part of the story as part of their capital budget.
So we've got a lot of these talking points to work out as just bullets, straight out of the memo, which I think is a reminder for, the select board, and then having, Reed, if you want to be the second to follow that up with a couple of these comments about parcels that, without being specific or naming names, that have come to us in recent years and what may be on the horizon. So like there is a need for that fund, and continuing to contribute to it all makes sense. And Eric, if you want to jump in at any point, since you say you want to be there, then absolutely feel free.
Okay.
You have a little bit of a history with them too, having gone for the last couple of years. So that's great.
Yeah, if I can make it, I'd be happy to.
Okay.
I'm gonna write down some stories and I would like to not.
Bear in mind, we're not gonna have a lot of time.
All right, yeah.
And I'll confirm with folks, but remind me if you don't hear about agenda and when this is showing up.
Okay.
I'm almost sure it's the 7th, and I don't know what time yet.
And you're gonna add the ERF to the planning memo.
Yeah.
Okay. Great. Then we'll adjourn. We don't have a meeting on the 1st because the town offices are closed. So Andrew told us that a couple of weeks ago, but I think on the agenda today it still said the next meeting was January 1st.
All right, we'll fix that.
Yeah.
15th, yeah.
Yep.
Cool.
15th. All right. See everyone then.
Yeah, happy holidays,
Right.
everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good holiday.
Great.